Thank you, Ken. Good morning, everyone. How are you today? Good? Beautiful, beautiful day. I want to acknowledge the president of Camping College who's here, Ben Fury. Ben, do you want to stand up, please? One of our partners, Frederick College president. So on behalf of the University of Regina and all of the partners that we have here today, and the partners who made this day possible, I'd like to welcome you to this symposium, Responding, Our Role in Education for Sustainable Development. And that includes the many people who are going to be joining us by live feed over the internet. I understand there's 75 centers who potentially will be watching this symposium today from all over the world. So that's the benefits of technology. Sustainability is critical for us as we look to the future. It's important to us, everyone in this room, but it's also very important to our next generation. And I'd like to mention one partner in particular who contributed to this symposium, the University of Regina Students' Union. They contributed funds to support today's event. I wonder if, is Kyle here, Kyle Addison, the president of the Student Union? I know he is coming. Students are playing an important role in addressing sustainability issues going forward. And our student union ensured that in our strategic plan, Mama Waka Machuin, moving together towards a common goal, sustainability came out as one of the pillars for us. So it is critically important to this generation. I think this next generation is a generation with the most social conscience that we've seen in decades. And it is amplified by my own two younger children. My son Samuel is studying environmental science, and my daughter Taylor is studying aquatic resources. And they are committed and passionate about sustainability. So this event today is developed to provide an opportunity for an open dialogue about the importance of sustainability in post-secondary education and the implications it has with respect to education for sustainable development. And it is important to note we have two of our Deputy Ministers of Education here today. Deputy Minister of Education for Saskatchewan, Audrey Roadhouse, and the Deputy Minister of Education for Manitoba, Gerald Farthing. And they're here because they recognize the importance of it for children, our children. So thank you for both of you for coming and participate today. While we have an amazing panel of experts, we also want you to know that this is a discussion, a work in progress, a roll up your sleeves discussion. That's for you, roll up your sleeves discussion. We want you to provide your insight. We're fortunate to have 7 key people to provide their perspective on education for sustainable development and share their interpretation as the morning unfolds. I know that education for sustainable development is important to this university. It's a pillar in our strategic plan. It's important to our students. It's important to us as parents and grandparents because we need to leave the world in better shape than we found it and that we're living it. It's a way, this symposium will bring this to life. It's important for other sectors though, as Ken mentioned, groups and organizations, business, industry, and government. For that reason, we have representatives from different sectors that have come together for our panel today to begin a conversation that we all can participate in, a conversation about sustainability in which we can listen, not just hear, but listen to each other and determine the best ways forward. My daughter Taylor always would say to me, Mom, you're not listening with your eyes. So I'm going to ask you today to listen with your ears, but also your eyes as we go forward. It's important to listen and hear diversity of thought and different opinions in order to shed light on a common and important challenge. And I know that this will take place here today. And I was originally scheduled to moderate the session, but a university-related media conference has been called for this morning, so I'm going to slip out and slip right back in afterwards. So I will be here with you this morning, but I will not be moderating, and I'm fortunate that my very able Vice President of Research, Rod Kelm, will be moderating for me, so thank you, Rod. So I will see you later this morning, and I will ask Rod to take over, but thank you very much for giving up your morning to be here, to listen, discuss, and talk about a very, very important issue for our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren, and for us, sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President. Thank you all for coming today. What a great venue, what great weather. It's wonderful for October. I'm very pleased to be here today to moderate today's discussion, and we're looking forward to a very active, lively, interactive session as we go through with today's event. But to begin, I'd like to first introduce the people sitting around the table here at the panel set, and who are giving generously of their time to bring their expertise and passion on post-secondary education to today's session. First on my right is Dr. Charles Chuck Hopkins, the UNESCO Chair of Education for Sustainable Development, and he's at York University. Next to Dr. Hopkins is Dr. Bob McCulloch, President and CEO of SciAST, and I'd like to point out a former faculty member of the University of Regina and Associate Vice President. I've been around here long enough that I have this long-standing history. Bring in a few of these other little aspects. Next to Bob, we're very pleased, in from the province of Manitoba, Gerald Farthing, Deputy Minister of Education for Manitoba. Next to Mr. Farthing is Audrey Roadhouse, Deputy Minister of Education for Saskatchewan. And at the far end, well known to everyone, is Dr. Malcolm Wilson, the Director of the University of Regina's Office of Energy and Environment, and also currently the Acting Director of the Petroleum Technology Research Center here on Innovation Place. One of our panelists who will be joining us a little bit later is not here at the moment, and that's Dr. Shauneen, President of the First Nations University of Canada, and we hope to see her here in a few moments. And one other member of our panel that I need to introduce, showing here on the video screen, is Dr. Bob Willard. He's joining us by video conference, and we're delighted that he'll be here for the entire session, linked up with us. A well-known speaker and author who is on the board of Learning for a Sustainable Future, and also a faculty member of York University's Sustainable and Education Academy. Welcome, Bob Willard. So, So for today's session, we will have a total of 7 panelists, and I will moderate questions and answers and discussion at the end of the session after all of the panelists have spoken. To outline what we'll be doing today, each speaker will speak for roughly 10 to 15 minutes. And during that time, that each has made, taking notes and holding on to questions and thoughts and comments for the later session to bring together an interactive component at the end of the overall presentation. We want this to be a very interactive session, so I encourage you all to participate in the question and answer section. But before we proceed, I'm going to give you a few ideas of some of the questions to reflect on as we go forward with today's session. And I'd like to thank Garth Picard for providing me with a set of questions here to think about throughout the session. First of all, how can post-secondary education inform provincial and federal policy? Next, what role will post-secondary education play in the future of the planet? Why is it important in the business world to be educated in education for sustainable development? What value does education play in preparing children, K to 12, to embrace education for sustainable development? And what can we learn from First Nations peoples about education for sustainable development? So now, without further ado, I'd like to call upon Dr. Charles Chuck Hopkins to give us a sense of the global nature of education for sustainable development. Dr. Hopkins, please. Thank you.
Well, good morning. And I should add the word friends. As I look out through the audience, I see so many people that I know and have worked with in the past. And good morning, Bob, and good morning to the people who are watching. I've been asked to try and give a bit of a global overview and to set the stage for the discussion this morning, and also to pick up from where I left off on my last visit here this morning. Or my last visit here about a year and a half ago, I guess it was. So looking forward. Now the context, we mentioned the Bond Declaration this morning. Ministers of education from around the world are looking at what is the role of education, public awareness, and training programs in trying to meet the challenges that our society is going to be facing in the future. We realize that somehow we're going to have to figure out how to look after roughly 50% more people, using less land, less water, already mining prehistoric water in the way of artesian wells and so on. And how are we going to prepare people to work internationally as well as locally, to be able to communicate, to negotiate a way forward, and to move from a concept of the purpose of education really being development to sustainable development. So these are the challenges that are out there. Now, in order to try and do this successfully, we're going to have to figure out ways of overcoming corruption, new forms of rethinking government, new forms of communicating and thinking our way forward. Is not as though we know the answer. It is much more about what we know is not sustainable than what we know really is sustainable. And we'll have to figure out political systems of being able to move our societies forward. We need a learning society that is out there. It's not as though here's a vision, we all buy into it and we go. It is something that we need to learn together and to evolve forward. That's very, very difficult. So at the heart of it is just even challenging, what is the purpose of education? At the international level, at UNESCO, which is the meeting place of the world's ministers, of education, etc. In 1996, the last huge commission came forward with these goals: to know, to do, to become all you can, and to live together. And what we're trying to do is to tweak that last one, to learn to live together with others sustainably. And the whole thing of who are the others, and how are we going to be able to develop and to work collaboratively so that we don't think of others. Right? Next. So, trying to understand what is education for sustainable development. I was part of the writing team on Agenda 21 when it came to education, public awareness, and training. And the vision that we had was not to add yet another school, another what we call adjectival education, another component into an already crammed curriculum. When I was superintendent of curriculum with the Toronto Board of Education, I was continually besieged by people coming in with their binder and saying, would you just put this in the curriculum? I think the curriculum was officially full in 1912. But we keep shoehorning it. Not that they're not important, but this is the wrong approach. I now have a list of 100 simply from the OECD countries. If I were to go into South America and start adding local concerns, I could easily hit the 200 number. No, could you put up the next one, please? What we're talking about is education itself. What is the contribution of the world's education systems? What is the contribution of the world's public awareness systems and the training systems, both in the private sector and the public sector? That's what we're talking about. The output of institutions of higher education is really what we're talking about here this morning. Next, please. Now, this is where, on the promotion, this is where I left off. I put on the same tie, same suit, very sustainable, and I think I'm standing. Because when I left here, I was talking about the complexity of what we were trying to solve. This is Lake Chad. We have Chad, the country of Chad, Nigeria, Cameroon, and right beside here is the Sudan. And this is Lake Chad in 1972. And the setup is this. Up in the top right, we have a nomadic Muslim Arab. In the top left over here, we have African Muslim, and down in the bottom, they are also nomadic and some bit of farming. Down in the bottom is rich farming, and that's African Christian. Now, next slide, please. That was 1972. This is 1987. Now this lake is one of the 4 Great Lakes in Africa, about the size of Lake Manitoba, Lake Winnipeg, maybe slightly bigger. But you can see with climate change, the shift. So the nomadic people are down on top of the farmers, and then on top of that, we found oil, and beyond that, we found uranium. And so we have international powers in trying to use one group of people against another group of people, and terrible. Now, is that social? Is it environmental? Is it economic? No, it is extremely complex, etc. Could we move on, please? So what we see is not only is it a local problem, though it is a global problem. Every morning in Barcelona, and that's just one place where I've been, as we have around 2,000 to 3,000 illegal immigrants claiming status in Europe every single morning. So we have programs now in Africa, or just in Mali, where they have programs trying to convince people not to try and do this because it's extremely dangerous. They're preyed upon by robbers and murderers in their own countries and the countries they have to move through. Again, the social impact. And we know that putting up borders really doesn't work. So next, please. So what's the role of institutions of higher education? Now, Bob will look at this and he will smile, I hope, because this is modified from Stu Hart's work that Bob actually introduced me to. It's a variation from the MBA program, and I've changed it around a bit. I'm looking, because it's so complex with all of these different issues, and when we start looking in higher education. So what I've done is tried to figure out what is the university or higher education institution's ecological footprint, but what do they contribute in the way of handprint? What is the really positive thing that they can bring to the community, and today and tomorrow? And I'm sort of, today down in that bottom half, you put the next one up, I think I put in one more. Yeah, so we have all of these kinds of assessment and trying to green it. Now, institutions of higher education all over the world, they realize the savings from energy, water, waste management. I mean, if they don't recognize that, they shouldn't be an institution of higher education. They should lose their ability to grant degrees, if you haven't figured that out. But, so that's largely where we are. Could I have the next one, please? But tomorrow, where do we need to be in managing our own business? We should be exemplars for the whole of society. We need to be really there in green design and these kinds of things. Now, the next one, please. So we want to talk about, today, we're largely looking at these issues from the natural sciences. When we look at climate change, and we're mainly focusing on climate. So the next one, please. But really what we need to be doing, if we're going to address it, we need to engage the humanities and the social sciences. So on the one hand, we're talking about understanding the issue. That's where we are today. But what we need to be doing is to engage in it. How do we bring about the kind of social change that is going to be demanded and needed as we move forward? Next one, please. Now, there are many things there, but when we look at the role of institutions of higher education, in 2 weeks' time, I'll be meeting with presidents of about, I think there's 17 institutions of higher education from the 4 corners of the world that are coming together to look at how do we move from greening our institutions to greening the minds. About 2% of the world's population actually gets to go to higher education. But about 85% of the world's decision makers go through institutions of higher education. And so that is why at Bonn, with the ministers of education all meeting, they singled out some major things that needed to be done. One was the engagement of teacher education institutions around the world. There are 60 million teachers. We can't engage 60 million. But what we can do is start looking at how do we change the preparation of new teachers. How do we work on the in-service of teachers? How do we learn our way forward? And there can't be one vision from UNESCO. This has to be done in a locally relevant, culturally appropriate way. And we now have a network going in 67 countries around the world with networks of institutions that are looking at what does make sense in our own culture. We need to engage public education and realign the very purpose of education, as I said. And one of the key ones was this idea of how do we engage higher education, because this is a tremendous leverage point to get to the world's decision makers. But the problem is, how easy is it to try and engage higher education? Sweden was the first off the mark that I'm aware of, where the government suggested that all education, including higher education, had to address sustainable development. Well, immediately the pushback from the faculty saying government doesn't tell us what to do, etc. So the rectors all went away and huddled and came back and said, yes, we'll do it, but not because you're telling us to. We'll do it because it's the right thing to do. And they understood the pressure from their students. And then they had to deal with faculty and so on. But the issue is that how do we deal with complex issues? We're not really set up for transdisciplinary work within higher education. I mean, that is a real crux. That oftentimes when you collaborate between the social sciences, the humanities, the natural sciences, it does not enhance your march to tenure, but at what point do we revisit what needs to change within higher education to truly serve humanity and to get on with this big issue? How do we increase our role in community service instead of it just being a little byproduct? How do we actually get in and work with community if we are going to bring about the wide-scale social change that is needed? How do we roll up our sleeves and go in there as co-learners, listening to our First Nations people, to our Indigenous people, to the voices that are out there that have tremendous wisdom? How do we learn to learn alongside them? Learn to change our mind? These are the issues that I hope we will be addressing this morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity to set the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuck, for that very thought-provoking talk. Amazing to think that only 2% of the population actually goes on to higher education, yet 85% of the decision makers undertake higher education. I caught a couple of thematic aspects out of that talk today that sort of put some notes down. He stated the greening of the minds. That's a wonderful phrase. I think we should all embrace that. Another one I really enjoyed, because we have many discussions about this in the academic realms, the march to tenure. I thought that was an excellent comment as well. So thank you so much for that wonderful talk, Chuck. As well, now moving on the agenda, this time Shauneen Pete, who was originally scheduled to speak, is not here, and hopefully she'll be along later. But I'd now like to invite Bob Willard to speak. Hopefully, Bob, you're ready back to back?
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so without further ado, Bob, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you again for allowing me to participate remotely in this very significant event. I'm excited about what's going on there, and happy to be a part of it, even if it's a little bit more virtual than sometimes. I've got a few remarks that are under the guise of the role of post-secondary education. A lot of my focus is on the role of the business community and trying to engage the business community on these sustainability issues a little bit more proactively than they already are. So what I'd like to try to do is reassure you that if a post-secondary education is attempting to prepare graduates for the public sector, the private sector, that there is a readiness factor for people that do understand the complex issues success as businesses. So let me give you a couple of results of surveys that may be of interest to you, just to reassure you that there are some wonderful things happening. One of them is an article that was in the Harvard Business Review in May of this year. It was called The Sustainability Imperative. And what that article was doing was indicating that there is a mega trend going on in the business community, which is a very strong word. It's a fundamental shift with some upside and some downside. And what it's talking about is a sustainability imperative that has emerged in the last, it says 10 years, it's actually more like 3 to 5 years, where we have public and government concerns over those 4 things that you see at the bottom of the slide. So we've got climate change, industrial pollution, food safety, and natural resource depletion. Climate change, of course, is the big one, but the others are all actually important too. The language that's being used in the article was most exciting to me, because what it's really saying is that sustainability has moved from the margins into the mainstream of business. And when something becomes an imperative, it's not something you pay attention to when you've got nothing else to pay attention to. It means that you had better pay attention to it, or you may find that you are at a competitive disadvantage if you don't. I'm now going to show you 3 slides from a survey that was done last year. The results came out in June of this year. And what this is doing is asking chief executive officers, people in charge of large companies around the world, what they think is the relevance of sustainability or environmental, social, and governance, ESG issues, to them and their organizations. And what's exciting here is that you see the orange line, which is the 2010 results, is significantly longer than the gray line, which is the 2007 results. So what CEOs are saying is that they need to embed sustainability into the company's strategies and operations, the deliberations of their boards, their subsidiaries, their global supply chain, their partners, and also the way in which financial analysts judge the value of their organizations. So the exciting thing there is that what we're talking about is the rapid recognition by people in charge of organizations that these are important issues and that they need help from the kind of graduates that come out of post-secondary education to deal with these issues. So that's kind of exciting. The CEOs are in the last 3 years, dramatically improving or increasing their attention on these issues as being valid imperatives for them to come to grips with. A couple of other slides from that survey may be of interest as well. This is the one that shows the stakeholders who are influencing the point of view of the chief executive officers. And you'll notice that the top 4 are the people who buy the products and services of the organization, the consumers, the clients, the customers. The second one, the employees. And then you get governments and communities. And those are the big 4 important stakeholders who are putting more and more demands, more and more expectations on companies to clean up their act and also be proactive about addressing some of the issues that are more legacy kinds of issues. And this third slide is one that shows that what they hope to get from that is an improvement in their reputation, their brand image, the trust that they have. With who? With those stakeholders that you saw in the previous slide. They can also, the second one says that it has some potential for revenue and growth and cost reduction, so that's good. That's good for the bottom line. They're personally motivated and their customers are looking for this, and employees are also wanting to work for companies that they're proud to work for, whose values resonate with their values. So what we have is a wonderful recognition by CEOs that this is not a tree hugger issue. This is not a greedy issue. This is a hard-nosed business issue. And that they need to pay attention to this in a way that they haven't before, and therefore they need help doing the appropriate strategies and executing on those strategies for people that get it on this, which is why they're putting more expectations on post-secondary education to produce graduates who understand these things and can do something useful with it. So a lot of the work that I do is really trying to help businesses get CEOs to pay attention to these issues, to equip people with numbers and business cases that help them see that important stakeholders want them to do things that they're not already doing. And this is transforming the corporate purpose, the corporate culture, the corporate paradigm. And during the day, that's what we do. We try to equip sustainability champions to be more effective and to get on with it. Really, those CEOs or chief executive officers lead two lives. They are business people during the day, the 9-to-5 day, they're called CEOs. They try to limit the liability of their organizations. They try to externalize their impacts as much as they can. But the nice thing about it is that during the rest of the day, the 24/7, they are at home and they're called mom and dad, their parents. They're not called CEOs. And there's a very different paradigm there. Now, if we want the most effective change agents on the face of the planet to be able to get them in that 24/7 type of environment, what we need is to ensure that we are besieging them with kids who receive education for sustainable development in the schools, the K-12, in the colleges, in the universities, so we don't have to wait for these people to grow up and become active leaders in business and in the public sector. Right now, today, armed with the knowledge that schools in Saskatchewan and Manitoba and other progressive provinces are doing in education for sustainable development, and progressive universities and colleges as well, these people go home, they have these conversations with their parents, and they increase the likelihood that these business leaders are going to pay attention to something that we really care about. Why? Because they're almost embarrassed into it by the kinds of questions and pressures that these people as parents and grandparents are experiencing. So what is the role of post-secondary education? It's two things. One is to help these graduates understand these complex sustainability issues so that they're more effective contributors to the solutions of these organizations after they graduate. And the second thing, and from my humble opinion, the most important thing, is that they're helping these people be change agents while they're in the institutions. That they go home, they go into the community, and they engage with all of these other people and helps shape their minds so that they're ready for these messages. And that's exciting, and I applaud what's going on in Saskatchewan, and especially the University of Regina, to build that momentum with the research center that you're putting together. So happy to be a part of this.
Thank you very much, Bob. Very encouraging to see the shift with the CEOs, the very positive shift between 2007 to 2010. I love the comments about being besieged by your kids with regard to their knowledge with respect to sustainable development. Okay, our next speaker, I'd like to invite Audrey Roadhouse, Deputy Minister of Education in Saskatchewan, to come and speak.
Do I speak from here? Yeah. Great.
Feel free.
Thank you. I'll begin by welcoming those of you who've traveled from out of the province to join us here in Saskatchewan. We're delighted that you're here. I also bring warm greetings on behalf of the Government of Saskatchewan and the Ministry of Education. This morning I'd like to share with you our government's overall focus on sustainability, the strategies being implemented at our ministry level, and the role that I believe post-secondary institutions play in contributing to our communities through pre-K to 12 education. The Government of Saskatchewan is fully committed to sustainability, includes strategies for environmental education and education for sustainable development in our provincial goals for economic growth. Several years ago, the government committed to spend $70 million over 4 years on green initiatives as part of our Go Green program. Go Green funding of over $2.5 million in 10-11 will establish the foundational elements of the provincial climate change plan, including the Office of Climate Change, the Climate Change Foundation, and the Technology Fund. More than $15 million in grants will be provided through programs and measures aimed at mitigating or avoiding the negative impacts of some of Saskatchewan's most important environmental challenges. Our government's long-standing partnership with SARCAN, the Saskatchewan Association of Rehabilitation Centres Recycling Division, continues to ensure environmental benefits to our province while providing important employment opportunities. A $21 million grant is provided to SARCAN in 10-11 to support their operations in the beverage container collection and recycling program. A portion of this funding, $4 million, is provided through the Go Green program. Crown Investments Corporation and its subsidiary Crowns continue to demonstrate environmental leadership through a variety of initiatives and programs as part of the government's commitment to help Saskatchewan people go green. Programs are designed to enhance environmental sustainability in the sector and the province in general. All Crowns, even those that do not produce significant greenhouse gas emissions, are required to identify performance measures which are monitored and reported on annually as part of the Crown Sector Performance Management System. An example, over the course of next year, Sask Power will develop an electrical power generation strategy to meet our province's future needs. This strategy will include a significant commitment to increased wind power, an excellent source of clean renewable energy. Sask Energy will continue to provide incentive programs such as the Programmable Thermostat Rebate Program and Energy Star Prime Rebate Loan Program, which could impact up to 7,500 customers in 2010. It is anticipated that approximately 15,500 customers will also participate in programs indirectly administered by Sask Energy, such as the EnerGuide for Houses Grant and the Energy Efficient Rebate for New Homes. Saskatchewan Government Insurance is meeting an election commitment by continuing to provide a 20% rebate on insurance premiums and registration fees for hybrid and other fuel-efficient vehicles, providing incentives for the purchase and use of more environmentally friendly vehicles on our roads. At the ministry level, the Ministry of Education currently has representation on both the Saskatchewan Education for Sustainable Development Network and the Steering Committee of ESD Canada. The Saskatchewan ESD Network is a multi-sector and multi-agency committee that aims to foster a culture of education for sustainable development in the formal, non-formal, and informal education sectors. Throughout the past 2 years, Saskatchewan's ESD Network has undertaken a number of activities to further the establishment of a provincial culture of education for sustainable development. These include coordinating youth forums for sustainability in Regina, Humboldt, Saskatoon, and Prince Albert, hosting a sustainability symposium at Luther College High School, the development of the Saskatchewan ESD Action Framework. The framework identifies goals, objectives, and actions and provides examples of projects that would support ESD, and supporting the production of Green Life, Learning to Live with the World, a 6-part series which ran on a local television network. The Ministry of Education's focus on education for sustainable development is broad. Since 2008, all new school capital projects are built to a Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, or LEED, Silver Certified standard. New schools being built must meet 7 prerequisites in order to be certified, and those include everything from erosion and sedimentation control to storage and collection of recyclables to air quality performance. We, as a ministry, also have a green team of staff who are working to make sure we are walking the talk by helping to integrate a culture of green into our everyday workplace actions and into the decisions made by our employees. A few of the initiatives which are currently underway include recycle stations for every floor in our building, auditing and reducing the number of garbage bins throughout the building, and the creation of a worm composting or vermiposting unit. We are one of the first ministries to put our green team into action, and the changes in behavior and operations we are seeing so far are exciting, encouraging, and I also have to say they're fun. Our ministry's mandate includes the development of an outcomes-based curriculum, including a focus on environmental education, conservation, and sustainability. To that end, an emphasis has been placed on integrating environmental and sustainability concepts and principles into all K-12 curricula wherever possible and appropriate. The Ministry of Education has made several enhancements to our pre-K-12 curriculum to include a more focused approach to teaching the benefits of sustainability to our students. Environmental education, conservation, and education for sustainable development are very evident in the renewed science curriculum in many grades and are also reflected in social studies, health education, arts education, and language arts. For an example, our health education curriculum focuses on developing engaged citizens through a sense of self, community, and place. Students in grade 5 begin to build a capacity for active involvement and an understanding of the importance of healthy relationships with the self, family, community, and the environment. These capacities and connections contribute to the sustainability of local and global communities. Practical and applied arts curricula in the resource cluster, including wildlife management, forestry studies, and energy and mines, also have a strong focus on environmental issues. And students in grade 8 art education are encouraged to express their perspectives on social issues, including sustainability, through drama and collaborative creation. As the leaders of tomorrow, our students will benefit from learning about sustainability at a young age. They in turn then become young opinion leaders, engaging their friends, relatives, and neighbors in conversations about greening their world. In fact, and here's the besieging part, ask any grandparent and they'll likely tell you that their knowledge of the issues related to preserving our planet have been gained through discussions with their young grandchildren. Our panel today is focused on the role post-secondary institutions can play. And while my examples and areas of expertise are on our ministry's focus within pre-K to 12, I'll also note that it is critical to us that new teachers entering the field of pre-K to 12 have a solid foundation of knowledge on the importance of education for sustainable development. And I will add, as you all know in schools today, yes, teachers are our number one employee as far as numbers, but we have many, many other people involved in running school divisions, engineers, facility planners. So anyone who works in the school environment obviously needs knowledge and a commitment to this area. So for us, the seeds of expertise must begin within the walls of post-secondary schools. Our graduating teachers must come to us armed with a solid understanding of the ways our young students can impact their world. Through our teachers' passion for sustainability initiatives, it is our hope that our children will then carry that torch home to their families and their community and share the knowledge they have learned and what can be done to lessen their own environmental impact. With that in mind, just imagine the interesting conversations our youth will have with their parents and grandparents for many generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you for presenting those numerous initiatives being undertaken by the ministry. Very much appreciated, Audrey. I also picked up on another phrase from your talk, and that's culture of green. So greening the minds, culture of greening, excellent. Moving on now, I'd like to invite Gerald Farthing, Deputy Minister of Education from the province of Manitoba, and your option here.
Thank you. I think I'll stand. I do enough sitting. Too much, actually. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the people who invited me. I'm going to give a perspective, a K-12 perspective, more than a post-secondary perspective, because in Manitoba we have two departments of education, and I'm the Deputy Minister of the department responsible for K-12 education. And in the time that I have, I'm going to break my remarks into sort of three parts. I'm going to give a little background or context. Then I'm also going to talk about what we're doing in the Department of Education with regard to ESD. And then I'm just going to make a few concluding remarks. Hopefully all of this will lead to some questions and discussions later in the morning. First of all, a bit of background. Manitoba is the lead on for the Council of Ministers of Education, doing work on developing a framework for collaboration and action on ESD. So the Council is the Ministers of from the 13 jurisdictions across the country, and Manitoba is the lead with regard to the work that that organization is doing. Manitoba also represents Canada on the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe Steering Committee on ESD. And so once a year, usually I go, this year I'm not, someone else, my alternate is going in from the department to Geneva to participate in discussions with other countries, the other 56 countries that are a part of what's called the UN ECE. In addition to that, as part of the context, I need to tell you that Manitoba is looking at renewing its green strategy. Manitoba has had a Sustainable Development Act since the mid-90s, and a committee of deputy ministers has been established to look at what can be done to renew our approach to greening the province. And finally, it's important for me to note how much work is going on in schools and school divisions in Manitoba with regard to this. It's not just the department that is doing a lot of work, it's also a lot of other people, both in our schools and outside of our schools, but I want to particularly note all of the work that's going on in our schools and school divisions. There's a tremendous amount of activity, work and enthusiasm in our education system. So that's a bit of a background, and that's the context in which I work. So what are we doing in the Department of Education? I'm not going to go through everything because I don't have time, but I'm going to highlight a few things. And the first thing I want to highlight is that ESD, or Education for Sustainable Development, is a priority in our department. And it's a publicly stated priority, and it's something that we talk about all the time. And if you Google Manitoba Education and you go to our mission vision statement, our mandate mission vision statement, you will see it stated there. It's a one-page, on the website is a one-page that talks about our mission and vision and our overarching goals and so on. And you will see that teaching and learning how to live sustainably in the future is one of our top priorities. We are working with schools and school divisions and other partners on a number of things. This is ongoing work, and the first of those that I want to mention is offering professional learning opportunities. I'm sure it's the same here, but in Manitoba, our schools, our teachers are doing a lot. They feel that it's hard to do more, but of course this is a non-negotiable. This is something that must be done. We all realize that, and so we must support each other in that work. And part of supporting teachers in doing this work is to work with them to figure out how we can offer professional learning opportunities for them to be able to figure out how to incorporate education for sustainable development into what they're doing. And that gets me to the next point, which is we're working with them to figure out how to do this, how to incorporate this into the existing curriculum, so that this doesn't become, as Chuck said earlier, an add-on. It becomes part of what they're already doing. To help them do that, we're identifying learning resources, and we're also developing learning resources. And we're also encouraging them to take a whole school approach. As Audrey indicated earlier, this is not just about what goes on in the classroom, although that is central and that is key, but it's about what goes on in the whole school. We all know that students take a message. Students take a message from what goes on around them, and the more that what goes on around them is consistent in terms of the messaging, the more that our students will get what it is that's being, the message that we're trying to convey. And so we're encouraging our schools to take a whole school approach and involve everyone in this effort. Now, I just mentioned that we're incorporating the teaching and the learning of how to live sustainably in existing curriculum and what schools already do. And that's what we're doing through the whole of the K-12 process. But in grade 12, we're developing a course called Global Citizenship and Sustainability. And we see it as a capstone course. And it's a course that's there for teachers to teach and students to take that tries to draw together all of what they've been learning in the prior 11 years. And to take and look at that learning in a more concentrated way. And then to try to connect the dots in perhaps ways they haven't done prior. As Chuck pointed out earlier, this is very complex. It is complicated. It's not so complex and complicated that it can't be figured out over time, but it is going to take time, and it's not a simple matter. And so the idea of the idea behind this course, Global Citizenship and Sustainability, is to give our teachers and our students an opportunity to try to figure out what all of this means in a concentrated way. We're also introducing ESD into our technical vocational programming. On the more academic part of the education, now we're moving to technical vocational part of it, and I think that's a very important development. We're working with an organization called Fort White Alive, which is a nature preserve within the boundaries of the city of Winnipeg, within the perimeter, to develop a program that for teachers, a professional development program for teachers to figure out how to talk to students about, learn with students what it means to live sustainably in an urban environment. And I think this is a very important development as well. I think sometimes we have the idea that when we're talking about the environment, we're talking about being in a park somewhere outside of the city or in the countryside, or this is about a mine somewhere far away from where most of us live, or it's about agriculture or something like that. But actually it's as much about, and perhaps more about, and in the future will be more about how do we live in an urban environment in a sustainable way. And we really need to work hard at figuring out what that might mean. And so we're pretty excited about the partnership that we're developing with this nature preserve called Fort White Alive. We're also developing a very, very strong relationship with an organization called the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center. That's an organization that's set up, they have about 100 staff who do for and work with First Nation schools in the same way that the department works with provincial schools. In other words, they try to support the First Nation schools. The department, as you know, the province has no jurisdiction over First Nation schools, although we work with First Nation schools whenever it's beneficial for both of us to do so. But we're partnering with the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center around ESD. I think it's going to be a very strong partnership. I think we're going to learn a lot from each other. They bring a perspective that is somewhat and in some ways different than ours. And I think it's a very important perspective, and I think it has something to do with remembering, because it's more recent for most of those, for many people, First Nations people, than for many of us, what it means to be connected to the natural environment. I mean, why that First Nations people, and First Nations schools, I should say, and communities always talk to me about land-based courses, and I've often wondered, well, what is that really about? And I think that is what it's really about. I mean, it's not only about the past, it's not only about connecting with tradition and the way things used to be done and so on, but I think it has something to do with a connection to the natural world and the environment, and I think we can learn something from First Nations people with regard to that. We're also working with the faculties of education in Manitoba to figure out how ESD can be incorporated into teacher training. Up until recently, our focus has been on in-service, not pre-service. And we're shifting that focus now to be as much on pre-service as on in-service. And so we're partnering with the faculties, and as someone pointed out earlier, you don't tell the faculties what to do, you work with them on a partnership basis, and that's what we're doing. And I think that work is in progress, and it's going along well. I mentioned earlier we have a whole school approach, and as Audrey pointed out, we do in Saskatchewan, in Manitoba. It's just that I like Saskatchewan so much. In Manitoba, all of our new schools must meet a silver LEED standard, and in fact we try to get them to meet the gold standard. We're not always successful with that, but certainly the silver standard. And now we're looking at how schools, the actual design of the schools, the size, the dimensions of the windows and different angles can be connected to the curriculum so that our schools can be actually learning tools. And that's a very interesting, I think that's going to lead to some really interesting work. And the last thing I want to mention in terms of what the department is doing is to tell you that we're trying to do what we encourage others to do. And we've got a big initiative in the department about how to do our work more sustainably. And it involves a lot of things, and some of them quite straightforward and simple, like printing on two sides of a page, carpooling, not using plastic water bottles, things like that. But we're trying to figure out how we do things in our everyday work in a more sustainable way. I have three, I could make a lot of concluding remarks, but I just want a bit of time left, so I just want to mention three. The first is, you all know this, but this is not just about climate change. It is about climate change, but it's not just about climate change. Without climate change, we still have many, many very serious environmental challenges in front of us. And if they're serious for us, I think they're going to be even more serious for our kids. I think what this means is that we all must try to think in more, what I would say, what I would term as being ecological terms. We all must become ecologists. Perhaps some of us need to become deep ecologists, but we all must, to some extent or another, I think, become ecologists. And I don't think we're used to doing that, generally speaking, but I think that has to become part of the way we just generally understand, view, and interact with the world, and it becomes a frame through which we make decisions. We ask ourselves, well, if I do this, if we do this, what does it mean in ecological terms? What does it mean? What kind of impact will it have? I don't think we're used to asking ourselves that, but I think that's where we must go. The second thing is, and this is a difficult thing, I wouldn't want to underestimate how difficult this will be for many of us and for our kids. And that is, we're already doing it, but even more, we have to question just how much of the planet's resources, each of us individually and collectively, those of us who already have all of our basic needs met, and that's whom I'm talking about. I'm not talking about those people whose basic needs aren't being met. I'm talking about us and others whose basic needs have been more than met, actually. How much can we expect to consume? How much can our kids expect to consume in a sustainable and socially just world? That, I think, is going to be a central question, is a central question. It's an important question now, but it's going to become an even more important question for our kids. And they're really going to have to grapple with that. And I suspect, and I'm talking about my own kids here as well, they're going to have to adjust their expectations, I think. If they want to live in a sustainable world, in a socially just world, I think they're going to have to adjust what they believe they're entitled to or should expect in terms of consuming material things. That may, in fact, lead to a better quality of life than they would have otherwise. I think that's certainly a possibility. And I think we need to talk about that. And then the last thing is that, as I said earlier, there are many in Manitoba. We have partners, Manitoba Forestry Association, Manitoba Hydro, Ducks Unlimited, the Manitoba First Nations Education Resource Center, and others, many other partners who are doing a lot. And as I said, there are in our schools and school divisions, there's a lot going on. And that's what we need to keep doing. We need to keep talking about this as much as we can, and we need to keep working together. I often say that in education, we can all do more and we can do it better if we work in partnership. And I think that applies across the board, but it especially applies here. And so my final thought is, my final comment is that we need to keep working together and to prepare the next generation for the challenges they face. So thank you again for inviting me, and thank you for your time.
Again, thanks very much, Gerald, for that presentation. Along with your discussion about the whole school approach, etc., I was thinking about the three take-home lessons that you left us with. Passionate plea for the need to all become ecologists, the fact that we should become our own consumers conscious, just how much should we consume and what we need to be thinking about that at all times. We need to reflect on that, and the need to work together, and therefore the linkages that you've already established with First Nations and your partnerships, very well done. That's very thought-provoking too for the group. Okay, so moving forward now, I'd like to call upon our next speaker, and that would be Dr. Bob McCulloch from SciAST. He's going to stay put.
Thanks, Rod. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be back at the University of Regina, and for today, I'm going to call it Ken's Research Park. Ken, thank you. It's great to be back. Great to be back here. Ladies and gentlemen, as Dr. Kell indicated, I'm very honored to be able to make comments on the Saskatchewan Institute of Applied Science and Technology, what our role is in education for sustainable development. If I may, I'll also take some liberties and talk a little bit about the role of the technical sector for all of us that are involved in the Association of Canadian Community Colleges. And so let me begin by saying I'm very optimistic where we are and where we're heading. I do believe that we're on the right track. I'm delighted that later this morning we will pause and celebrate by signing an MOU that confirms that we'll work together on sustainability. And I also hope that some of you might have time at 5 o'clock this afternoon. We will hear from Dr. Hopkins and others, and again, I'm signing my life away today, I think. I'll be signing a sustainability protocol from the Association of Canadian Community Colleges. So I do recognize and I acknowledge so many aspects of our system are committed appropriately, and I think our challenge is to keep that momentum going around sustainability. I would, if I may, just to try and add a little different slant this morning to my comments, I'd like to pick up on what Chuck and Bob said about sustainability as a social responsibility. A social responsibility. And some of us in the audience actually were at a session last week that talked about, you ready for some acronyms? CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility. And I'd like to get there in a few minutes. You can turn the volume down. This is the commercial part of my talk. Because I have to brag. You know, again, in good old Saskatchewan, we just don't brag enough about the great work. So our role as a technical institute in our province, and we have committed to this, and we picked up from some great words. We're part of the formal education system, and our responsibility is to, quote, meet the needs of the present without compromising opportunities for future generations. Now that's a fundamental definition of sustainable development that we accept, and that's our driving philosophy. Chuck, I would suggest that we've been greening the mind, and while we didn't use that nomenclature, we've actually been doing that at SciASC for years. It certainly predates my work at SciASC, but in fact it probably goes back decades. Now I want you just to think about some of our programs. And Dr. Hopkins, I assure you, we do not and will not be planning a program in environmental sustainability. But we have for years had programs in environmental engineering technology, water and wastewater technology, integrated resource management, forest ecosystem technology, and on and on. We have 160 programs. This is the real commercial part. We serve 26,000 students, and so many of our programs have for years been talking around sustainability. We've talked about environmental concerns, and I just would like to highlight just a few of the projects that are underway within our organization. A great little practical program that we call, in partnership with Sask Energy, Share the Warmth. So our students from the Architecture Technology program and the Environmental Resource programs go out to city, to our communities, to our houses in the cities, and they do some great little things. They change the thermostat to electronic time thermostats. We help with insulation around the doors and windows, and we really are working at a grassroots. We're really proud that we have a small urban wind turbine in Moose Jaw. You got to come and see the little thing. And the idea, it's led by Ron Thompson, the idea is to look at what's the potential in an urban environment of wind generation. We've got another neat little project. It's called 100 Mile House. Of course, you think it's a city in, I think it's in Alberta, isn't it? But what we did was our architecture students built a shelter constructed exclusively of materials found within 100 miles of the building site. So they had to use the material that they could gather up. We're really proud to serve 2,500 Aboriginal students, and we're trying to build in Aboriginal approaches to sustainability in so many of our programs. Just two more examples, and then I'll get to my theme on community. a community garden green roof project that's led by Reg Forbes, again from our architecture program, where we try to incorporate some environmental sustainability elements in literally a roof over top of a garden. And we're really proud of a recent announcement from my colleague, Dr. Shauneen, who received a $200,000 NSERC grant to look at wastewater remediation. Now there's a great practical example of sustainability, and think of the import of that project. So watch for Shauneen's work there. Now, if I may, let's stretch ourselves a little bit on sustainability. We do believe, and I believe personally, that sustainability is a social responsibility for all of our organizations. And we try to include it as part of all of our curricula. We try. Certainly we could do better, and we must and we will. But again, I would suggest that sustainability has to be more than just the environment. No, I don't mean that, but not just. It has to be more than the environmental consideration. Watch for the changes in board governance. Again, Bob was talking about this, but boards are now asking of post-secondary leadership for sustainability reports. 5 years ago, if someone would have asked me for that, I'd have stared blankly and gone, what on earth are you talking about? But sustainability, think of these points. We report to our board on reputation, and think of that from a potash or a BHP perspective. Do you think they're thinking of the reputational sustainability? Operational sustainability, that's the fiscal, the fiscal aspect of it. Every month, I report to our board, we report to our board on what's our situation. Our health sustainability. Think of the wellness programs that are incorporated at all of our institutions. Our safety reports. And, importantly, of course, our environmental reports, our environmental sustainability reports. In business, I love to hear this sudden awareness of corporate social responsibility. Have a look at some of the big companies now. I wish I could get this job, I think, in my next life. I want to be the vice president of corporate social responsibility. Chuck, I think you and I will start a business, we'll get these going. Corporate social responsibility is all about sustainability. The other catchphrase is enterprise risk management. Enterprise risk management, ERM, your other acronym that you'll take home today. So when you leave today, you'll have two things. You'll have great talks, but you'll have a couple of acronyms, CSR and ERM. CSR is not the television show, and ERM is enterprise risk management. It's really about sustainability. How do we assess risk, make sure we're sustainable? So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this is a little different approach. These are all about organizational sustainability, and these must be part of all of our post-secondary programs. They must be part of our business programs. They must be part of our engineering programs. They must be part of our technology programs. And we would welcome, in the technical sector, those kinds of challenges. I can tell you that our board challenges us around corporate social responsibility and sustainability. Board governance is going to be helpful to us when we look at sustainability. It's much beyond, do you prefer fiduciary or fiduciary? I hear it pronounced both ways. However you prefer, board responsibility and sustainability is much more than fiduciary responsibility. Sustainability and social responsibility are fundamentals to our boards, and they're fundamental, I believe, to post-secondary education. Let me summarize. Our programs, we must do a better job, and I'm just repeating, we must do a better job of including and incorporating sustainability in every one of our programs, and not just in the sciences as has been talked about, but across the piece. Again, I'll use business, our health sciences, and so on. Sustainability connects education to the corporate world. And that's what I think we need to keep building on. We need to partner with corporate world. We need to partner with our communities, and I think this is a great opportunity. Sustainability, of course, to repeat, it's about improving the quality of life. And in closing, I want to quote the Earth Council: sustainability requires environmental knowledge, health knowledge, economic prosperity, and social equity. Think of the role of post-secondary education on all of those, and if we can accomplish and achieve our goals in those 4 areas, we should stand up and be very proud of our role in sustainability. Just some thoughts for you from a SciAst and technical perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for that focus on social responsibility, and just what I need, 2 more acronyms to confuse my life. But in any event, I appreciate that. CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility. I think I'd be remiss, since Bob put in a plug for the windmill that's sitting out at Moose Jaw, if I didn't apprise you all of the nice windmill that we have sitting up here at 2 Research Drive, which is, I should point out, is a sort of a transdisciplinary research initiative undertaken with several individuals, Faculty of Education led by Garth Picard, Faculty of Engineering and Applied Science, and I actually see the prime researcher sitting here in our audience right now, Amber Henny. So if you're ever driving up and down this South Boulevard associated with the University of Regina, please look on top of 2 Research Drive, and you'll notice this windmill, vertical windmill spinning. I'd be remiss as well if I didn't mention the cooperation and the financial support we received from Innovation Place in the installation of that particular windmill. Another example of the great partnerships that are occurring here at the University of Regina and with others. So moving now to our last speaker, Dr. Malcolm Wilson. I hope I didn't take away some thunder about the windmill, Malcolm. So.
The thing actually destroyed everything, Rod. I'm just going to sit down again. We've just heard the panel, and I've actually just sort of taken my talk and rewritten it here very quickly. So if it's a little disjointed, I hope you'll bear with me. I want to pick up on some of the themes that come out. I mean, firstly, Bob, I fully agree with you, Bob McCulloch. We really do have to brag more, and we've heard about what's going on at SciAst. We've heard what's going on in the province through our Crown corporations and so on. And certainly we have an awful lot of activity inside the university, and I'm not even going to begin to get into all of the initiatives. Rod's mentioned the windmill and a cooperative venture with Innovation Place. What I'd like to do is just sort of pick up on some of the themes and really sort of give you a bit of personal feeling around this, and then sort of venture into some of the things that we're doing, should be doing, and really challenging ourselves to do more. The intergenerational theme's an interesting one, and as we talked about schools and children in the schools being good mechanisms, good processes for bringing the whole area of sustainability to CEOs, but also to the rest of us. I remember my kids being in primary school here, and as soon as they got in the car, they'd instantly say, "Dad, put on your seatbelt." It's a very effective mechanism. If we sort of take a look back a bit and look at our more agrarian past, it's very easy to look at the intergenerational aspects of sustainability. It became pretty obvious we wanted to leave the land in good shape so our successors could make a good living, have a good quality of it's not so easy to see that sustainability into the future. So our educational institutions have certainly got to play a major role in preserving that and encouraging that understanding of sustainability. If I take a look at, because I'm very much in the energy business, the university certainly recognizes the importance of sustainability. We have an Office of Energy and Environment to develop projects, to encourage research and so on, and certainly working with Garth in education is something that the Office of Energy and Environment can do. If we look historically in the energy business, oil was for many, many, many decades based on not just gathering wood and so on, but use of whales. And if we look at what happened, because we weren't dealing with sustainability, we didn't look at the whole issue of natural regeneration, etc. We came very close to the point of a complete extinction of whales in the global oceans. They were saved by fossil fuels. So we made the transition in the middle of the 19th century into coal, oil, and so on to replace that, saved what remained of the world's whale population. What is going to be important, though, is oils and coal are non-renewable resources. We see currently a lot of enthusiasm around things like shale gas, and I was at a conference recently where Shell was talking about 100 years of gas at current consumption rates, maybe. And we saw from Chuck's slides how much the demand for fossil fuel is going to go up in the future. We can't count on it. We have to work towards the next energy form and move more into sustainable energy forms. We cannot afford to lose those lessons from the past. I don't think my carbon footprint is quite as big as Chuck's, but it's pretty bad. But I was at a conference in the Gulf Coast, and we look at environmental disasters that probably shouldn't have happened if the rules and regulations had been followed appropriately. And that was the Macondo well and the leakage of oil. There are some good things that come from that, and that is, as I said, I was at a conference and we were talking about the seafood, and some of the local regulators were saying we have to rebrand this food almost because people are steering clear of it, and yet this food is better tested than it's ever been. We know it's clean. The disturbing thing is I don't think that food was ever tested in the past. So what we're seeing is that a natural disaster has actually led us down a pathway where we're looking at that food in more detail and understanding the processes more. A natural disaster has a silver lining. We're leading to more sustainability there. I was also just reading the newspaper, and again, that's another discussion that Chuck had raised about Sweden being particularly a great advocate of sustainability, sustainable education. Also see in the newspapers that of countries that have weathered the financial storm, well, Sweden's right at the top. Is there a linkage here? Is sustainability fundamental to a stronger economy and a more resistant economy? So, coming back to the university, As I said, there are a number of programs out there that the university has that have a relationship to sustainability. The strategic plan of the university includes sustainability as part of the activity, and this really is only part of it. We need to be more open and visible in engaging sustainability as part of everything that happens at the university. And this is, I guess, in a way, kind of an internal challenge to the university to, as Audrey said, let's start walking the talk here and certainly make sustainability more visible. My own particular area of carbon capture and storage, this is very much in the realm of dealing with sustainability and really understanding and dealing with the climate change issue. This is a long-term environmental issue that we need to deal with. This is also a challenge to the province. Saskatchewan is in one of the countries in the world that is the worst performer when it comes to personal CO2 emissions, and Saskatchewan sits right at the top of that list. So we certainly have a role in leadership, and I see this as a challenge that the province needs to meet, and certainly we have a lot of activity already underway to help us meet that challenge. What are we doing? We're not only developing the technologies that are required, but we're also developing the people that are going to be required to meet these challenges as we move out into the future. We're also doing some of the supportive work, understanding things like life cycle assessment. Are we making the right choices? The other thing that I like to keep putting out there is, of course, for every problem, for every complex problem, there's a simple wrong solution. And we have to avoid making those wrong decisions. And things like life cycle assessment is a way of avoiding and making the best possible decision. So with that, and just to go back to our wind turbine, I think that is one of our efforts and of really demonstrating what sustainability is, recognizing that we need to be looking now at alternative energy sources, not in 30 years or 40 years when we start running into problems with availability of fossil fuels and with the global changes that are going to occur. We saw what was happening to Lake Chad. We certainly don't want to see similar things happen here. So with that, I think I'll finish and say we have a whole stack of challenges ahead of us, and can we live up to those challenges? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. I think it's interesting that you made the comment here that work to the next energy form and more sustainable energy. That was kind of taken also by the comment that, in fact, the rails were saved by the fossil fuels, and now, of course, we have fossil fuels in our carbon footprint issues, but that's interesting. And also coupled with that, sometimes out of a disaster, there is a silver lining, which like you talked about with the food test. But my real take-home out of this is, yes, we have many complex problems, and there's always a simple wrong solution. Definitely feel that one will be indelible. But importantly, we must all show leadership by example. And I'm pleased to say that the university, Malcolm mentioned that again, about the wind turbine and a number of efforts we're making here, hearing it from SciAS, etc., this real global consciousness that is occurring around sustainability is really important. Before I invite the panels to make some comments in general after having heard all 6 presentations, I think I'd rather invite you to join with me to thank them all for these very stimulating presentations. So at this stage, before I open up the mics for the public mics and for questions and answer session, I just wondered if any of the panels would then like to now add in a comment or two following the presentation from everyone. So anybody? No? That's all.
Yeah, I guess we are just deafened everybody. No, I mean, I just go back to your comments, Rod. I mean, this has been a very interesting panel discussion from my perspective, and I'm certainly continuing to learn. But I think what we need to be doing is we sit here and we, as go back, Bob, to your comments here, you know, we need to brag a little. We certainly need to be more open and visible in the work that we're doing that leads to sustainability. We need to celebrate that a lot more. And, you know, as I said, you know, Saskatchewan is truly one of the bad boys when it comes to personal carbon footprints, and yet we're doing a lot here, and we're not celebrating that enough. We're not seeing that out and getting recognition for what we're doing.
Okay, so stop being humble.
Yes.
Gerald.
Well, I don't want to suggest that we should underestimate the challenge, nor should we ignore the urgency. I do think it's important to be optimistic about this, so I appreciate that comment. On my down days, I'm not very optimistic at all, but most of my days are up days and good days, and on those days when I do look around, I am optimistic. And I'm optimistic because of what is going on in education in many places and increasingly going on. I'm optimistic because of what Bob Willard talked about and what I see happening in the private sector, in the business community, for various reasons. We're all motivated by multiple ways. I'm optimistic because I think part of the answer has to do with technology. I don't think that's the whole answer, and I wouldn't want to put all my hope into that basket, but I think there are some answers there that are going to help. And then lastly, I think that we're at a tipping point, or we're close to a tipping point perhaps, in terms of us being willing to individually and collectively change our behavior. And I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket either, but that is obviously part of the answer. So, you know, sometimes I remain convinced that this is continue to say this is a huge challenge, and I am worried. I'm worried about the future of my kids, frankly. I'm worried about the future they're going to face. But I think that with the requisite effort, this challenge can be met. And I think we should go forward with that belief and be optimistic about that.
Charles?
The idea of hope, I think, is extremely important. I've been doing some work with the world's public relations, advertising industry, and so on, because I figure we can't really move forward without engaging and talking and learning from them as to how they do shift approaches and so on. And one of the things they said, it must be hopeful, it has to be seen as an opportunity, it has to be seen as doable, and it has to be seen as essential, and you have to form a way of almost them belonging to something. You know, there are all these strategies that they know, and so I'm trying to approach these, because in the end, we can have corporate social responsibility, but until we have individual social responsibility, and that is not as much as a sham as some of the corporate social responsibility is. How do we actually move towards that? And the hopefulness that I have is that the concept that I threw up of how I try to sort of all these individual things, from new technology for cracking shale gas to lighter tiles on roofing so that you don't have to have those big timbers in developing countries and rooftop. That idea that I put up in how I sorted out between ecological footprint of our institutions, York, where I am, we serve about 120,000 meals a day. So we're the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases in Toronto after the airport. When you figure out, it is a huge ecological footprint. But on the other hand, the ecological footprint, was developed by Bill Reese at the University of British Columbia. And as I travel around the world, everyone knows and understands it. It's a brilliant concept and an idea from a PhD. But the other term that I use, the other one that I use, the ecological handprint, came from a little girl in grade 4 in Hyderabad, in India, who talked about, well, I can do something about my footprint. And the idea of, I have hands. And it's that positive approach of what we can do to address it. And so I like that range, and today and tomorrow. But I'm not trying to sell that. I'm just trying to share with you, it is the idea of how do we sort out all of the various approaches and complexities and components as we move forward. So each of us has a strength, but how do we bring this all together? Gerald's idea of the capstone course is extremely important, because as one goes through school, we get bits here, bits there, and it's left up to the student to try to put it together in some cohesive fashion wrapped around ethics and values and so on, which is at the core. So I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Okay, maybe now we'll just open up the floor for individual questions. Please identify which panelist you're directing the question to, or it may be to all the panelists, and have a group discussion on that. I'd like to point out that Bob Willard's still with us online, so questions there. So the floor is yours. Anybody? There are 2 mics here. No pent-up questions? Oh, here we go. Tanya, thank you.
Great, guys. Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful presentation. It's really exciting to see this happen in Regina, Saskatchewan. I'd like to think about the idea. We have a number of people here in different capacities, and fortunately we have Gerald here from Manitoba and with a lot of experience, and I'd really like to see how post-secondary education can play a role in facilitating leapfrogging what we already have. So how can we implement in K-12 and training our future post-secondary students, and then how can post-secondary education take the wealth of the research and knowledge that we have in other places and use that to actually go ahead further than we already are, instead of playing catch up. So this is to everyone, and of course this involves all pillars of sustainability, and so I'd like to hear your comments on whether or not you've thought about that and how we could actually try to do that in partnership with industry, academia, government, and public.
Who would like to respond first? Chuck?
We realize that there is a need to try and move forward at the community or much smaller level within my role in the university, or the United Nations University. Now, right here in central Saskatchewan is one of these big experiments. They're called Regional Centers of Expertise in Education for Sustainable Development. And Saskatchewan was one of the very first ones in the whole world. There are 75 of these giant research experiments going on around the world. And the idea is to try to bring together two big groups. One being the educators in the community. Okay, so the universities, yes, but also public education, as well as museums, zoos, botanical gardens, faith-based groups, all of the people who educate. And on the other hand, the people who know what are the social, environmental, and economic issues facing the community, which would include urban planning. It would include research centers and universities. It would include government, etc., and elders, and whoever really knows what are the issues now and what's coming. How do we take that information, that reality, and put it into our education systems? That's the grand experiment. And I must congratulate Saskatchewan. It is one of the leaders in the world and is a partner in what is happening here today. I'm spending 5 days looking at leading innovative approaches that are going on here in Saskatchewan so I can share them with other countries around the world.
Gerald?
I'm not sure if this answers the question or not, but it just sort of caused me to have this thought. You talked earlier about this being complex and so on, and this is always the case, but I think it's especially the case now, that when we're talking about learning to live sustainably, what we're talking about is learning while we're teaching. And I think we need to be very upfront about that, and we need to be very upfront about that with our students, because they know that we haven't got it figured out at any level in the education system. And so I think it's a question of, and I hesitate to use this language a little bit but anyways, really, because it's trite to say sometimes, but this really is about going on a journey with them. Right through from before they start school actually, but certainly when they do start school, right through into their post-secondary education or into the world of work, whenever that might happen. And it's about learning with them as we try to teach them what we might know that they don't. And I think this is, and we often talk about learning from our students, and we do, although as adults and with older than them, we should have something more to teach them than they teach us. But we do have something to learn from them. But in many areas, but I think especially in this area. And I think this is how it becomes, in a way, and I think that's what the answer to the question was about how you manage the transitions, how you go from one level to another with people. So I think it's about learning together as we try to teach. And we're trying to teach because we're educators and we're adults and we're students and we're kids. And that's what it's about. But as we're doing that, we're learning because it's a work in progress. And they know that. They know that.
Thank you, Gerald. Paul?
Yeah, thank you for the very good question. I have to get my hands going to answer this one because the challenge that we face, I think, across the education sector is it's so much easier to go into your discipline, to go into your area of expertise. And I think the institutions have made a great effort of stretching, and I see, again, optimistic about disciplines. You hear about interdisciplinary programs. I can tell you we've made great strides about interinstitutional partnerships, and I still remain optimistic as well about the partnership and the links from the post-secondary world to the K-12 world. In the technical sector, sadly, the partnerships are really focused on industrial programs. So we offer a lot of our industrial programs in the K-12 system. I'm looking forward to where there's a much more broad-based array of opportunities for the K-12 system to look at environmental resources, those kinds of things. So please keep pushing us. We are engaging in those discussions. And in closing, I think there's really good signs as I see more students in all of their learning being involved in community activities. I'll go on record. I think the earlier that education students are in the classroom, the better for them. I think the earlier, Vianne was in an announcement this morning on our collaborative nursing program. what I love about our curriculum in that program is our students will be on the wards in clinical placements from first year through fourth year. They will be integrated, and that's really what it's all about.
Thank you, Bob. Bob Willard?
Yeah, let me just build on a couple of comments because I was quite taken with the optimism theme that Gerald had and the hope theme that Chuck had, as well as the idea of this journey, as you called it, Gerald, that the students are on and we are on as we try to figure out what a sustainable society would look like and what our behaviors would be in that kind of society. We need role models. We need role models for the answers, and we need role models for the process of finding the answers. And that's what excites me about post-secondary education's role in the community, that you folks provide a learning lab. You are a learning hub in the community, that you've got expertise within your faculty, within your staff, within your students. And we've also got tentacles out into the community through the government connections that you have, the corporate connections that you have, the social connections with the community that you have. This is the dynamic that we need to get better at. How do we figure this out together? How do we tap into expertise that we desperately need but have done a very, very poor job of capitalizing on? And what's the process by which we come to that? What's this education all about, this educational process so we can build a more sustainable society? The people who wrestle best with those issues are folks in academia. You understand it and then you apply that, which is why colleges and universities to me are learning labs for the solutions that we together need to figure out. And from my humble perspective, it's only within the last 3 to 5 years that most universities and colleges in North America have recognized the opportunity. It's more than just sort of a lug-a-mug program in the cafeteria, but this is an opportunity for the leadership of these institutions to be more visible to the community, and that's really exciting.
Thank you very much, Bob. Question here?
Yes, hi, I'm Kurt Schroeder. I have a question for Audrey. Audrey, earlier this year I was part of a public consultation process concerning the new Climate Change Act, or some. I'd like to know, where are you in that legislative process, regulations and so on, and to what extent is or could education play a role in advancing that public policy?
You know, the specifics around where we are in the legislative change, I'll have to get your name and information after and get back to you because I don't have that level of detail in my own notes. And as far as sort of climate change and the Ministry of Education, I could either ask one of our staff who are here today to speak now, or perhaps speak to you at the break around this. I'm very pleased to have our senior staff from the Curriculum and E-Learning branch here today around specifics around curriculum content.
Okay, so maybe we'll cover that at the break then. Malcolm?
Add to that comment, I certainly will say that the Department of Environment is moving very aggressively on developing the regulations. So they have set up a number of committees to look at the content that goes behind the legislation, and they've got some very aggressive schedules set for those subcommittees to look at. I know I'm on one of them, and recognize that there's going to be quite a significant challenge to meet the goals. So it is progressing. I believe the Act still has to be proclaimed, but other than that, it's in place. It's passed through legislature, and as I say, the overall consultation process is well underway for developing the regulations that will underlie that Act.
Thank you. Donnelly?
Yes, thank you, Ron. I also have a question for Dr. Roadhouse. We've heard quite a bit about children having a positive impact on the parents at this meeting. And in order for that to be effective, however, the children, the students must have a good understanding of the issues that they're bringing home. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the plans that you have to strengthen the science component of the K-12 curriculum, so that the graduates would really have the knowledge that is required to understand issues surrounding climate change, energy needs, development of natural resources, and so forth. Thank
you. Education, not advanced education. So what I need to speak about is the efforts within the Ministry of Education to make sure that the curricula are strong, so that the teachers that come out equipped in this area then have the excellent curriculum documents, the outcomes that are clear, so that they can then use that to teach the students. And just on that note, something that ties into a couple of other comments that have been made around schools as learning tools and some of the initiatives that are going on. As you know, these days it's really important that our youth are very engaged in learning at an early age and get sort of hooked on that inquiry-based learning approach, so that they can, as we move forward, solve problems that as Gerald said, we don't know, and we know there are going to be many other, I'll call them unpredictable situations, where students are going to have to apply those 21st century learning skills. And so one of the things that is emerging is that combination of school design and curricula. And so, for example, in the new school designs, what you'll see are the meters for water consumption, for energy, for solar, are actually built into the school so that the students can use them and see them as part of their everyday learning. And so from the time that they're very little, they can speak to someone who's looking at that meter and talking to them about what are they using that meter for, what does this mean. They can use that knowledge in their math and in their science and in their everyday life. And so if you get an opportunity to look at where school design is going to incorporating those things right in the everyday learning for the students, so that the adults and the students can learn together and can solve those problems together. So that's the kind of, I'll call it a very integrated approach that we're trying to do in education these days.
I think Chuck would like to.
Just very briefly, the idea that we can is kind of unrealistic. The reason being that the teachers themselves do not have the accurate background knowledge. And so we have to come up with ways of partnering between universities and faculties of education and in-service work with teachers in ways in which we can actually deliver accurate information. And so there are partnerships being formed between school systems and universities to bridge that gap. And in fact, yesterday I was at a school in Saskatoon where a memorandum of understanding was being signed between a secondary school and the School of Environment, I think, a new School of Environment there. But this is happening around the world, because simply passing the legislation, you should teach this or you should teach that, is pretty unrealistic unless we back it up with the human development and the resources and how to do that and so on. We can't just download the task.
Thank you very much. Question here?
Yes, I'd like to ask about reward systems. My name's Glenn Suter. I work at the museum here in town. It's nice to hear blood from museums in some of this. I'm an ecologist by training. I took a degree in conservation biology here, and it was fun. It's a fun thing to do. But in fact, I only learned about human ecology, which I now study, through my museum work. And it was a wonderful, expanding process to go through. And I think it's convinced me that we do have a cultural evolution in front of us. And we need to deal with very highly ossified institutions, highly ossified communities, social norms, everything that's entrenched and continues to be entrenched because of feedbacks. Feedbacks we're getting from the media and all different sources of information. So that takes me to asking about rewards. If we are going to effectively adapt and evolve our cultures towards sustainability, I think we do need to build on strengths. We need to have inherent feedback loops that are going to encourage those steps, encourage survival of sustainable options. And I think the best way to do that is through positive feedback. So interesting thoughts from all the speakers about what sort of reward systems can we put in place to deal with faculty, to keep people optimistic, to make sure we actually keep things moving forward.
Thanks for the question. Anybody? Panel, start. Malcolm?
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, I think you sort of almost answered the question as well as delivered it. I mean, we do have to recognize that, and this goes back to let's not be humble about it. Let's celebrate the success, particularly of, in the university's case, our faculty members that are doing work in sustainable development in whatever aspect. Make that work visible to the community, and in particular, of course, to students going through the university system, so they get to see what work is going on and potentially their role in that work in the future. We can go even further, and I like throwing out challenges, but we need to see this collaboration extending certainly upwards into the provincial government and hopefully into the federal government, so that those researchers are also rewarded not just with accolades to their work in a public sense, but also rewarded in being able to take on more graduate students, get more funding for their work, and so on.
Bob and then Gerald.
Thank you for the question. That your challenge is spot on. I can tell you that institutions, we are making efforts to go that way. I can, specifically to SciAS, it wasn't enough, and some of my colleagues will certainly comment. But we did establish, and we still have, a green projects fund that just to support initiatives in that area. And we're trying to reshape that to link into applied research and so on. Your point's well made. We have to incent the system to provide opportunities, and then the challenge is on us to find creative ways to do that.
You have volume? Something new on here I have to say? We all know that we're externally motivated and internally motivated. We all know that. I think we have to pay attention to both. I think on the external side, we have to have price signals that changes people's behaviors. We have to properly price what we produce and what we consume, and I don't think we're doing that right now. We've got all kinds of externalities out there that we're ignoring. We also have to allocate resources in a way that motivates people to do certain things and provide, when they don't get those resources, they find that there's a disincentive to be doing something that they might otherwise do. On the internal side, I think, and this is where education, I think, has such a huge role to play, I think what we have to do is we have to create a community value around the importance of sustainability. I think that motivates people, some more than others, but most people to some extent, actually to a large extent, more than I think we often individually realize. So I think we have to create a community ethic, a community value that over time, around sustainability and around what it means to live sustainably, that we all, and our kids more than us, internalize. And that becomes an internal factor, an internal motivation. Some of it recognized by them and some of it not. but it's there. And I think we have to be working on both and keep an eye on both in terms of motivation. You know, that which can be how people can be externally motivated to change their behavior, to live sustainably, and how people can be internally motivated. I don't think it's an either or at all. I think those two things must work together in some fashion.
Question here. I'm with the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Saskatchewan, and my question could be for any of the educators at the panel, but is there a role for professional associations, whether it's engineers, physicians and surgeons, could be social sciences or construction associations, but is there a role to play in helping to develop new curriculum around sustainable development? Before I probably answer that question, I'll just put in a plug-in for some work that our association did with students and teachers in Saskatoon, developing a poster series for K-12 students. Those are on the screen at the back. So I guess there's several of the panelists who want to reply. I'll start with Chuck.
I think the messages from the professional associations are extremely important, because they do provide sort of the rewards, the continual idea of what's the current reality in our profession and what are we looking for in the way, because most people have a stereotype of what used to be there in the profession. So the role of the professions in engaging with institutions of higher education, and even in K through 12, the idea of what kind of people are we looking for? What kind of skills do you need? Where are we going? What is the vision of this profession as to where we're moving? So I think that message is an important component.
Audrey, then Gerald.
Maybe I didn't turn on. Yeah, I personally want to thank your association and other associations that do play an active role in the elementary and high schools. I know that many of you are actually in schools participating with students, whether it's helping them with competitions that they want to enter in engineering or help with creative design. And I think you play a tremendous role in modeling for students possible careers. And that really helps them get on fire as far as what they'd like to do and pursue their passion. And so, yes to your, thanks for your participation, but also, yes, please continue to share your expertise. And when we do develop new curriculum, we certainly go to you for expertise in a lot of professions for that in the content areas. Thank you.
Just real quickly, yeah, I think there's a huge role for the associations to play. One of them is Audrey has just talked about and Chuck talked about. That is a signal that you send to everyone when you say that this is important. But the other role is, I mentioned earlier that we're going to be incorporating ESD, or how to live sustainably, into our technical vocational programming. And that's going to become a real focus. And we're going to be going to industry and business and associations to get some practical help about how to do that. Because that's where the expertise is. And so I think there's a huge role in two ways for associations such as yours to play.
Thank you. Malcolm and then Bob Willard.
I think your professional associations, industrial associations, and so on are critical partners, and certainly we obviously look to you for help in development. But on the reverse side, I think you're the ones that are going to implement the best practices that come out from universities. So you need to keep a close eye on what we're doing as well.
Bob?
Yeah, I just want to applaud the excellent work that many associations and professionals are doing around this topic. And it really falls into two arenas. There is the so-called pre-service kind of training, where people are going through educational institutions, either colleges or universities, and becoming trained to be a professional in these organizations, whether it's engineering or certified management accountants or doctors or lawyers or MBAs or whatever. And then a excellent contacts with their members and can help them see things that at the time they went through their training perhaps weren't quite as connected to some of these things as they are now. So there's a pre-service and an in-service role that professional associations play, and it's absolutely critical to build the momentum that we need.
I thought it was time for a woman to get out behind the mic. Bob McCulloch talked about individual responsibility, social responsibility, and corporate responsibility. And, boy, do I have to compete with them. Anyway, I'm very concerned about the disconnect between individual responsibility and decision-making and corporate responsibility and decision-making. We all know that the prime motivation of corporations is to maximize profit. And in my view, and I've lived a long time, it seems to me when choices are being made, even on a small scale or a big one, maximizing profit trumps social decisions every time. It can be something as simple as putting Coke machines in schools or universities or taking them out, where we know what the right choice would be, but if a few dollars are involved, we make the wrong choice. I've had arguments on boards about providing free trade coffee. I wonder if Aramark could be persuaded to sell free trade coffee at the university because it's going to cost a little more. Now you go to the big picture. Do we all know that none of our investments or pension funds are not invested in oil companies in Chad or in Alberta or in Walmart that exploits Chinese workers? There's where the individual responsibility comes in. And I don't know if anybody wants to comment. We think that corporations are becoming more responsible, but Bob Willard talked about branding and trust because of pressure from consumers. But what that usually means is changing the advertising. If anyone wants to comment, go ahead. This is what I see around me.
Okay, does anybody want to step to the mic?
Can I comment on that?
Okay, sorry, thank you. Bob, oh, sure.
Let me just reinforce exactly what the lady was good enough to articulate. And that is, historically the purpose of a corporation was to make profit for their absentee owners called shareholders. And until the last maybe 5 to 7 years, they were able to get away with that, to very myopically focus on the bottom line and externalize a whole lot of other problems and pretend that they weren't really relevant to their role in society. What's happening though is that those stakeholders that I showed at the top of the chart are starting to rattle the corporate cage in a different way, where they're starting to point out to a corporation that it's not only important that they make a profit, but they do it in a way that is more socially and environmentally responsible. And it used to be that corporations would see either you behave responsibly or you make a profit. Happily today, it's very, very clear that companies can make more money, be more profitable if they are more responsible citizens. How much more money do they make? For a large company, they can make at least 38% more profit if they embed sustainability strategies into their business operation. For small and medium-sized companies, it's 66% more profit. How do we know that? Because we study companies that are doing this. So it's not, excuse me, it's not a polarization of these things. They're coming together. And the companies that get it are going to do the best. And the companies that don't get it are going to get run over by the companies that do. So companies are starting to understand that that reputation thing is a very, very critical aspect. And if they don't look like they're good corporate citizens, they will be removed from the corporate landscape. And they will be removed by the people who buy their products. So there's a change taking place in the repurposing of companies, the profit motive of companies,
recognize that there's still a lot of work to do around this, but the change in the last half-decade is phenomenal. I think just the recognition of the importance of social responsibility as part of a business operation should give you hope. The questions around this were really never contemplated, 15 years ago, if I can generalize. And I think you would find that people are recognizing, and as Bob says, the interesting point is going to be that if big corporations are not responsible, they will soon face the punishment on their bottom line. So they are starting to pay attention.
One of the complications that we're finding around the world is how do we make sure that we're in education and not in indoctrination? So we have to be a little clear on how to proceed to grapple with these real issues that students want to grapple with. So part of what we're trying to do is to develop sort of accepted frameworks to go into ecological literacy, social literacy, and environmental and economic literacy. So these things really don't exist, nor are there policies for many teachers to go in and become engaged in this kind of a quagmire. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. We need to do it, but we have to come up with policies, dealing with controversial issues, frameworks so that we really understand the different implications of it, and dealing with this with oftentimes faculty who have not been prepared for this. But it needs to be done, but it needs a sort of a concerted effort to make sure that we aren't just caught out on the limb of indoctrination.
Gerald?
This strikes me, and I'm picking up on some of the remarks the panelists have just made, and fellow panelists have just made, and that is that this is really it strikes me that this is a deeply cultural issue, and in the most broadest of terms, in general terms, and a little more narrower terms, it's a political cultural issue. And these things change slowly and over time. And we may not be thinking that things are changing fast enough, but I think we need to acknowledge how much change does happen and has happened. What is changing, and I expect this there'll be more momentum around both of these things in the near future, and that is that people will make other decisions about where they spend their money as consumers, and people will make decisions about what they want to put what they want to work at, what they want to put their life effort into, how they want to spend the time they have here. But these are deep cultural things that don't change overnight, and I think those of us who are concerned about this recognize it, so are others, of course, and then we just keep at it. If I may, though, I'm going to take this opportunity to raise one other, I think, fairly large issue, and that is we have been talking, as you noted at the beginning of your remarks, a lot about private and individual responsibility and behavior and so on, and that's good. In my life, that's where I start from. Being personally responsible and accountable and so on. And we also have been talking about the marketplace and business and so on. And I'm perfectly okay with that as well, because I am a strong proponent of, I believe strongly in a strong private sector. However, I think we also need to be talking about who's going to do what can't be done and won't be done by the market, can't or won't be done by the market, and can't or won't be done by private individuals, by individuals working privately. In other words, who's going to get behind what the community effort? And I think over the last couple of decades, we've gotten a bit out of balance. And we haven't, well, we should always start, I believe, talking about private and personal responsibility and behavior, and taking and feeling accountable for that to our fellow citizens. I think we haven't been talking enough about, and what we're going to need to talk more about in the future is the collective effort that's needed, and how do we manage that. And there's a real simple, straightforward example: public transportation. Some public body, some level of government or levels of government have to, I believe in the future, they're trying now, we're trying in my province, but the effort's going to have to be bigger, I believe, get behind putting into place an effective, efficient, sustainable public transportation system. That's part of the answer. So just to end, we need to, of course, as I keep saying, talk about our personal responsibilities, but we also have to talk about how we should work together as a community to do what needs to be done when it won't be done by the market or can't be done by individuals acting as on their own.
Thanks. Final question before I call John Yee to read a message from the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, and then we'll follow that with the signing of the MOU, and I'll invite card after that. So, final question, please.
Yes, I first want to thank the University of Regina for hosting this session on sustainable development, and also about bringing the university back into the community. And I'm Colleen Stinson, and I work for an organization based in a small community east of here called Regina Saskatchewan, and the organization is a non-profit organization called the Marable Enterprise Center. And we're a business technology center, so we're involved in business and we're involved in technology, and we have been since 1999. So one of the things that we're doing now, though, is around the environment. So we think it makes good business sense to bring in energy efficiency into our organization and create a demonstration home. So we want to be a role model in our region and also in Saskatchewan. So we're creating a project called Off the Grid, One Step at a Time. And so we're introducing solar thermal and solar photovoltaic, a 10 kilowatt system to try to offset some of our initial needs. So we think it's really important that people do this, but we're trying to create a community-based education program at a number of different levels. First, to the consumer, right, to show that it makes good sense, financial sense, to make the investment, especially in the long haul. You're going to be offsetting your needs, especially with increasing demand for energy and increasing price for it. The other thing that we're looking at is also with organizations, business development training, and also showing that how necessary it is for students to learn the skills with math and science at a basic level to understand what are going to be the future needs in education and in business. And that includes, learning how to build more sustainable homes, etc. So I wanted to share a little bit about what we're doing, not in an urban area, but that it makes good business sense even in the rural areas here. So I do have one, I guess I'm kind of more fact-finding, and I'm really interested in what people have been saying this morning. But, so Dr. Bob McCulloch, and I'm wondering at the university too, are there other kinds of partnerships with community organizations or other businesses that the university is doing to create some relationship with their students? I know they're doing a arts-related program with the PLACE program out of Melbourne, which is an exciting program, and I've been able to see a little bit what's been happening there with local artists, etc., but with local engineers and things like that, because those are some of the skills that we're finding that we're lacking. We come from a business perspective and also social science perspective, and we bring those together in our organization. But we don't always have the engineering and some of the other skills that we feel like we need to have to understand around energy efficiency, the concepts that we do need to understand for the future. So I'm just wondering if there's anything out there that may be able to accommodate some of our needs. And the other thing that we're trying to do is actually bring practical knowledge training into grade 5, 6, and 7 classes for math and science in the community of Grayson and the Grayson School. So we're inviting the school to come out in our area to participate, to come tour this facility, to learn about solar. We're trying to find ways to integrate understandings of electricity, solar in their thermal energy classes and things like that. But we're also looking at math, because we find that students, if they don't understand it at an elementary level, they're missing out at high school and they're dropping their maths. Now I know that one of the requirements for math students now is that for graduating, they actually have to have more math now than they used to. That's just starting to get into place. But we actually hire a lot of young people that are dropping their maths. So we want to be able to find a way to engage students in science and math in a very vigorous way, but in a practical way. And we think like the professional engineers associations and things like that would play a good role, but are there other things that the other institutions like SciAS and the University of Regina are doing?
So, thank you. You want to address the question on additional resources?
Thank you for the question. First of all, I should have been more elaborate, I guess, on the partnerships that I think are existing in our province. We have a great network where the universities and the colleges, we're integrated for rural delivery through the regional colleges, so I hope you've made that contact. We're really proud of the on-reserve training we do for example, in Coacatoose, Montreal Lake, those kinds of things. So I guess the hopeful signal is that the base, the building blocks have been established. We're proud to be partners with First Nations University of Canada in some programs, both in Prince Albert and north of Prince Albert. So lots of examples, the online learning and so on. Our people are in continuing education. That's their responsibility. Again, offline, I'll make sure I give you some people to contact, and we'd love to talk. The examples are there, but that's one of our challenges. That's why the beauty of this conference is we get to share ideas, and I can give you some other examples of partnerships with organizations that parallel your efforts, and we're partnering there as well.
Albert? Yeah, I mean, I really don't know all the programs in the university. I do know that President Dr. Timmons is very keen on community outreach. This is something we should talk more about. Engineering standing at the back there. This is certainly something that our engineering students could become involved in sort of outreach projects that have relevance to their work in engineering. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, but we need to dig into that with a few more people around the table.
Just before I invite John to the podium here to present on the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, I'd like to just thank the audience here for your participation in today's event. It's great. I'd also, of course, like you to join with me in thanking our expert panel for today's event. So the presentation.